Texas, 1884. The sun was sinking behind the dry hills when 24-year-old Clara Hayes stumbled onto a lonely ranch road, barely able to keep herself standing. Her brown dress was torn at the hem, her boots were covered in dust, and a thin cut above her eyebrow had dried with blood. For hours, she'd been running through the harsh Texas countryside, listening for the sound of horses behind her. Every distant hoofbeat made her heart race. She knew that if the men chasing her caught up, she might never escape again. Then, through the golden haze, she saw a lone cowboy riding toward her. Clara stepped into the middle of the road and raised both trembling hands. She begged him to stop, her voice weak from exhaustion. The cowboy pulled sharply on the reins and studied her carefully before climbing down from his horse. His name was Samuel Carter, a 31-year-old rancher who had spent most of his life working cattle and surviving the unforgiving Texas frontier. He wore a faded brown hat, a dusty leather vest, worn boots, and a gun belt that showed he knew how dangerous the open country could be. Samuel offered Clara his canteen without asking questions. She drank desperately, almost choking as the cool water reached her dry throat. Samuel noticed the fear in her eyes, but he did not push her for an explanation. Instead, he simply asked whether someone was hurting her. Clara looked over her shoulder before answering. She whispered that 3 men had been following her since morning. She did not know where else to go. She had already lost everything she owned, and she believed the men would find her before nightfall. Clara expected Samuel to demand something in return for his help. On the frontier, kindness was not always free, and she had learned that lesson the hard way. She lowered her eyes and quietly asked what he wanted from her. Samuel seemed surprised by the question. He told her that she did not owe him anything. If she needed a safe place, he had a ranch several miles away. She could stay there until she figured out what to do next. Clara stared at him as though she had never heard such an offer before. Samuel helped her onto his horse, then climbed behind her and guided the animal toward the distant ranch. Clara kept looking back at the road, expecting the riders to appear at any moment. Samuel noticed her fear and kept the horse moving at a steady pace, never rushing her and never asking her to explain more than she wanted. As the afternoon faded, Samuel's ranch finally appeared beyond a line of cottonwood trees. It was small compared with the wealthy cattle spreads farther west, but it had a weathered farmhouse, a barn, a water well, and several fenced fields. To Clara, it looked like a fortress. Samuel helped her down from the horse and led her inside. He gave her a clean blanket, warm food, and a place near the fireplace where she could rest. Clara ate slowly at first, still unsure whether she could trust this strange man, but exhaustion eventually overcame her fear. For the first time in many nights, she closed her eyes without knowing exactly what tomorrow would bring. Samuel stayed outside, checking the horses and watching the road. The following morning, Clara woke to the sound of chickens and distant cattle. For a brief moment, she forgot why she was there. Then the memories returned. She remembered leaving the settlement where she had lived, remembered the men who had tried to force her back, and remembered running until her feet were bleeding. She quietly stepped outside and found Samuel repairing a broken fence. He told her she could leave whenever she wanted. There would be no locked doors and no demands. Clara asked why he was helping someone he barely knew. Samuel simply said that every person deserved one chance to start again. Those words stayed with Clara throughout the day. She helped around the ranch, cleaned the kitchen, and prepared a simple meal. It was ordinary work, but to her it felt like the beginning of a new life. By late afternoon, Samuel noticed something strange. His horse suddenly became restless, and the cattle gathered near the far fence. Samuel walked toward the ridge and looked across the open land. 3 dark figures were moving slowly through the distance. Clara saw them too. Her face immediately lost its color. She recognized the horses before she could even see the riders clearly. The same men had followed her trail. Samuel reached for his rifle and told Clara to stay inside. But instead of running away, Clara stood frozen near the doorway, realizing that the safety she had found only hours earlier was now in danger. Samuel watched the riders approach and understood that whatever Clara had been running from was about to reach his ranch. The peaceful evening suddenly became silent, and the three riders continued toward them. Samuel stood near the ranch gate with his rifle lowered but ready, watching the three riders approach through the evening dust. Clara remained behind the farmhouse wall, terrified that the men would recognize her. The riders stopped several yards away, and the tallest man called out, demanding that Clara be handed over. Samuel did not move. He calmly told them that no one on his land would be taken against their will. The man threatened him, claiming Clara had no right to disappear. Samuel answered that whatever had happened before she reached his ranch was no longer his concern. What mattered was that she had asked for help, and he had given it. The three men exchanged angry looks, but Samuel's steady presence made them hesitate. The tallest rider finally stepped closer and accused Clara of stealing money from their employer. Samuel listened carefully, then asked why they had chased a frightened woman across the countryside instead of reporting the matter to the sheriff. The men had no convincing answer. Their story changed several times, and Samuel realized they were trying to intimidate Clara rather than recover anything legally. He told them they could leave peacefully or explain their actions to the nearest lawman. After several tense moments, the riders turned their horses around and disappeared into the fading light. Samuel waited until they were completely gone before returning to the farmhouse. Clara was sitting near the kitchen table with tears in her eyes. She had expected the worst, but Samuel had never asked her to prove her worth or repay him for protecting her. She finally explained that she had worked for a wealthy family in a nearby settlement. After discovering that the family intended to blame her for money that had disappeared, she had tried to defend herself. Instead, the men had threatened her and attempted to force her into silence. She had run because she believed nobody would listen to her. Samuel told her that she could stay at his ranch as long as she needed. But he made one condition clear: she would never be treated like property. The next morning, Samuel offered Clara something she never expected. She could remain at the ranch, work for an honest wage, and save enough money to build a future of her own. She could leave whenever she wanted. There would be no debt, no forced promises, and no hidden price for the help he had given her. Clara struggled to understand why a man living alone on a difficult frontier ranch would make such an offer to a woman he barely knew. Samuel simply told her that surviving a hard life did not mean a person had to lose her dignity. Those words changed something inside Clara. Over the following weeks, Clara slowly became part of the ranch. She helped maintain the farmhouse, planted vegetables, cared for the chickens, and learned how to manage the household while Samuel worked with his cattle. Samuel taught her how to ride safely across the property and how to recognize approaching storms. Clara, in return, brought warmth and order to a home that had once been almost completely silent. Neither of them spoke about the possibility of a future together. Their relationship grew naturally through trust, respect, and shared hardship. Months passed, and the memory of those three riders became less frightening. Clara saved every dollar she earned and eventually bought a new dress from a traveling merchant. When she looked at herself in the small mirror that evening, she hardly recognized the frightened woman who had once stumbled onto Samuel's road. She was still the same person, but now she stood with confidence. Samuel noticed the change and told her that she had built that new life herself. Clara smiled and reminded him that she could not have started without his kindness. Years later, people in the surrounding settlement still remembered the story of the cowboy who refused to turn a frightened woman over to men who wanted to control her. Clara never forgot what Samuel had offered that evening. It was not marriage, money, or ownership. It was something far more valuable: freedom and a chance to begin again. Eventually, Clara became an independent ranchwoman, owning a small piece of land nearby and helping other women who found themselves without a safe place to go. Samuel remained her closest friend and, in time, her husband, not because she owed him for saving her, but because she freely chose him. Their story became a quiet reminder of the American frontier. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage was not winning a gunfight, but giving another person the freedom to choose their own future.